haben wir auch noch eine schriftliche Presseerklärung für Sie, die wir Ihnen gerne in die Hand geben, wenn Sie rausgehen, auch nach Ihren Fragen. Ja? Dann würde ich sagen, bitte schön, Janis.
Thank you, Anja. Welcome all to the Red Salon. You will allow me to welcome you because we feel that we're at home in this theater. After all, DiEM25 was born in this splendid theater, the Volksbühne, back in February 2016. We were put together, as some of you may remember, by a coalition of European democrats convinced that Europe is fragmenting with detrimental effects for all Europeans, North, South, East, West. Our slogan on the 9th of February 2016 was, Europe will either be democratized or it will disintegrate. In the 15 months that have passed since then, unfortunately, events seem to have confirmed DiEM25's prognosis. Brexit is not an outlier. It is an early warning, and we better take note. An early warning caused to a very large extent by the incompetent and authoritarian handling of the Eurozone's socio-economic crisis and governance failures. Now today, following the election of Emmanuel Macron in France, whose candidacy, by the way, DiEM25 supported against the threat of the rise of the xenophobic neo-fascist Marine Le Pen in France. Nevertheless, the victory of Macron has caused a great deal of rejoicing amongst the establishment. They are immersed in a fantasy that Europe's disintegration and slide into a postmodern version of the 1930s has been halted by Macron's victory. Now, while it is true that Macron's victory did prevent the instant dissolution of the Eurozone and the European Union, it is our view, DiEM25's view, that his proposals for converting the Eurozone into a kind of federation light in exchange for neoliberal reforms that he's going to enact first in France, especially in relation to labor markets, are guaranteed to fail. And if they do fail, if we are right, we hope we're not right, but we believe that we are. If he fails, he will have dashed expectations that are now being created. And the dashing of those expectations are going to give the fragmentation and the construction process of Europe a vicious new spin. Now, on the one hand, Macron's domestic reforms, enacted before there is any kind of federation, before there is any kind of political or fiscal union, as he plans to do, to enact them first, what they're going to do in the context of diminishing aggregate investment within France, they're going to deepen France's socio-economic crisis and therefore strengthen xenophobic nationalism within France and beyond. While on the other hand, the German establishment, and that not just of Germany, but of the Netherlands, other surplus countries, countries that have a current account surplus within the Eurozone, will veto Macron's proposals for the treaty changes that he's proposing and which are indeed necessary in order to create this federation-light model that I mentioned. This combination, the deflation of the hopes that Emmanuel Macron has inflated, in combination with the strengthening of the socio-economic crisis, especially in France, will before long reinforce, we fear, the centrifugal forces tearing Europe apart today. Now, since its inception here in the Volksbühne, DiEM25 has posed a question to its members. We are trying to do politics in the reverse order to what is usually the case. Usually political organizations, movements, parties get together, They form central committees, they have flags, and then if you ask them, what are you going to do if you get in power? They say, well, we'll think about it. We're doing it exactly the opposite way. Since February 2016, when we got together here and created DiEM25, we've been very hard at work. We had a committee of 20 expert economists and hundreds, if not thousands, of our members trying to ask and answer the question, what should we do in terms of a unified, comprehensive economic and social agenda in every country in Europe, and at the level of the European Union and the Eurozone, in order to stem this crisis? The result of this labor, this effort, this collective effort, is a policy document, a policy agenda entitled the European New Deal. DiEM25 presented this document in Rome on the day of the 60th anniversary of the Rome Treaty of the European Union, of the European Economic Community, as it was called back then, in Rome on the 25th of March. During the Rome launch of the European New Deal, at a press conference, DiEM25 invited political parties across Europe, civil society organizations and citizens to join us in Berlin today, on the 25th of May, to discuss ways in which the European New Deal policy agenda could be put to European voters by 2019 across the continent, to bring the European New Deal to a ballot box near you, as we put it in Rome. Today and tomorrow, we're here with various political partners and members of the various spontaneous collectives of DiEM25 and individual members of DiEM25 to discuss the next step towards 2019. That's the title of today's event, 2019 with a question mark. Our purpose today is to remove the question mark and to replace it with an exclamation mark. Our answer, and this is what we're keen to discuss with you, beginning with this press conference and moving on to the event of tonight, our proposal is the formation of the first transnational pan-European political party, which we deem necessary to give such a comprehensive economic and social policy agenda as the European New Deal, the electoral expression and format that it deserves and that it requires. During the next couple of days, today, all through the night, and tomorrow, DiEM25 will develop in conjunction with our political partners and members from many different countries, political organizations and so on, a credible blueprint for the transnational progressive party that Europe needs, to be announced finally in Brussels in the context of DiEM25's real State of the Union event on 9th September. I shall now pass the baton to Srećko Horvat, my co-conspirator in everything, and then we will open the floor to Q&A. Thank you so much.
Guten Tag, es ist sehr schön, wieder zurück in Berlin zu sein, besonders in der Volksbühne, aber ich werde leider Englisch sprechen, because we have many members here from DiEM, from different countries, from Spain to France, from Belgium, from Serbia, and English is still the lingua franca. So while Merkel and Barack Obama are, as we speak, discussing democracy at Brandenburger Tor, and while Donald Trump is, after he just made a $100 billion deal with Saudi Arabians, is discussing the future of the world with the NATO leaders in Brussels, we are here not to discuss democracy, but we are here to bring back democracy to Europe. It has passed only a bit more than 1 year since we have been here, and in the meantime, DiEM25 is not just an idea, but it is reality. Only in 1 year, DiEM succeeded to gather more than 60,000 members across Europe, not only in European member states, but also in countries which are not part of the European Union, such as Serbia or Turkey, for instance. In 1 year, DiEM has established very strong connections and alliances with different political parties, from the British Labour, whom we strongly support at the coming UK elections, to the Linke in Germany, to the Greens from Italy, to Hungary. But at the same time, DiEM has also established very strong connections with different grassroots movements, such as Blockupy in Germany, the anti-G20 movement, which will make a big Alter Summit in July in Hamburg, but also something what we in DiEM and other comrades all around Europe call the rebel cities. This is the reason why the current mayor of Barcelona, Gerardo Pisarello, and also the mayor of Naples, Luigi De Magistris, are officially part of DiEM, and not only part of DiEM, but they are part of the advisory panel of DiEM, together with many, many other members. In this 1 year, DiEM succeeded, as Yanis already said, to work on something what we call the progressive agenda for Europe, which consists of very precise and coherent policy papers, from transparency policy paper, refugee policy paper, to the European New Deal, which we will discuss today. But what we said in Rome only 2 months ago is that this progressive agenda for Europe needs an electoral expression. Is DiEM going electoral after this press conference and after these events today? Well, I would say that DiEM already is electoral in a way. On the one hand, what DiEM has done, unlike many other political parties or movements or organizations, is that on every important, not necessarily every, but on the major important political events, our membership voted inside of using an online platform, so that DiEM members voted on the Italian referendum, DiEM members and DiEM voted on the official stance of DiEM on the French elections, on Brexit, and most recently, only 1 week ago, on our stance to support a progressive green left platform at local elections in Zagreb, Croatia, which was the first time that DiEM actually supported a local coalition, which we will also do in the future. So as you can see from this, DiEM is a hybrid movement. It combines what, if you allow me to be a philosopher for a second, it tries to combine horizontality and verticality, in the sense that at the same time we are developing grassroots direct democracy horizontality, but at the same time we are also experimenting with different forms of political engagement. In that sense, DiEM is a hybrid movement, and it will stay a hybrid movement. And if there was one, to finish, if there was one lesson of the French elections, it is not the rise of neoliberalism again on the one hand, and the rise of fascism on the other hand, because Macron today means Le Pen in several years later. There is one other lesson of the French elections, which I think, and we at DiEM, is very important. This is 12 million people who didn't vote in France. And this is not only in France, this is in every single European country. So if on the one hand, what is represented by the meeting of Merkel and Obama today, we have something what we call in DiEM the Austerity International, if on the other hand, represented by Trump, but also by Le Pen, by Farage, we have something what we in DiEM call the Nationalist International, what DiEM is trying to do today is to occupy a third space all across Europe to build a progressive international. And that means that from today to Brussels, all our members, all our partners, and everyone who is interested in bringing back democracy in Europe, we will start a deliberation and discussion of the creation of the first transnational pan-European political party. Which doesn't mean that DiEM is not staying a movement, but it means that we have to be aware that 12 million people in France didn't vote, and that new elections will come also in Germany. Thanks a lot.
Vielen Dank. Los kann es gehen mit den Fragen.
If I may just answer the first part, and then Yanis can answer about the second. DiEM already is, in a way, present at national elections. As I said, we were present at local elections in Zagreb. At the same time, what I didn't mention is that we have a very strong alliance with a political party in Poland, which is called Razem, which comes out of our idea that anyone in Europe who is ready to push and implement the European New Deal and the progressive agenda, if they are running for elections, DiEM is ready to support it. If such an option doesn't exist in a European country, we don't exclude the possibility that DiEM might have an electoral presence on its own. And I'll leave the other part of the question to Yanis.
Well, along the same lines, ideally, we wouldn't want to run for elections. We're not hungry for the trappings of office. But we are determined to take the only policy agenda we know that is rational, moderate, and radical simultaneously, rational enough, moderate enough, and radical enough to make a difference, to prevent the this constant descent into a combination of authoritarianism and economic failure in Europe. Just to repeat what Srečko said, in countries where there is a political force, a political party, or an alliance of parties, whose policy agenda is close to our European New Deal, and which we can see as part of the solution, not as part of the problem, we will be very happy to support them and to add the DiEM25 logo or imprint to their campaign. But in other countries where no such political forces exist, either because of disagreements or because of fragmentation, like for instance in Italy, where the political scene is dividing and multiplying as if there is no tomorrow, we may have to step in. But the way we're going to do this, to be precise regarding the mechanism, we make our decisions at the transnational level. So we preach the model and we live by the model that we preach. So for instance, let me give you an example. Take Greece, for instance. Is there going to be a political party with a DiEM25 imprint running in the next European Parliament election or national election in Greece? As we announced a few days ago in an event, a DiEM25 event in Athens, there are two prerequisites for that. Firstly, that we're going to have a substantial influx of new members in Greece. And secondly, that we're going to take a vote amongst DiEM25 members throughout Europe supporting the notion that DiEM25 will run in Greece. And this is very important, because to be a genuinely transnational movement and or party later on, we do not make decisions in Italy on the basis of the majority of our Italian members. We do not make a decision in Greece on the basis of what the majority of our Greek members want. We are not a confederacy. We're a transnational, unitary, pan-European movement. So the Germans who belong to DiEM, the Italians who belong to DiEM, the British who belong to DiEM, the Serbs who belong to DiEM will all vote on our strategy in Greece on whether we are going to run in the Greek national elections or European Parliament elections. This is how we signal to Europeans that a European demos can exist as part of collective transnational action. It is up to us to create the European demos that will put demos back into European democracy.
Is there a party in Germany that fulfills these requirements of DiEM25, like for example Die Linke or another party?
It is clear from our deliberations with political parties, organizations, civil society movements, that the answer to your question is both yes and no. And this is not an attempt to obfuscate, it's the reality. There are excellent people in the SPD, there are excellent people in the Greens, there are excellent people in Die Linke. I also had personally experience of discussions with politically minded Germans who are in neither of those parties or in some other parties, with whom we are almost in complete agreement about the European New Deal, about what needs to happen. But there is no single party whose leadership is capable of extricating itself from micro-political squabbles and having the conversation that we must have on the basis of policy and an honest exchange of ideas that does not involve politicking. This is not just the case in Germany. We experience this in many different countries. Nation-state-based politics, party politics, is not fit for purpose. We have transcended the period of time when there was a Willy Brandt, when there was a Bruno Kreisky, when there was even a Mitterrand or a Georges Marchais, that we could actually sit down and carry out a discussion on the basis of policy, of principle, and of tactics in a way that would be relevant to the problems that we're facing in Europe. This is why we have created DiEM25. Because if there was a political party in Germany that we could support, and one in France we could support, and one in Italy that we could support readily, well, we would have stayed at home and read books and, listened to music, and that would have been a far better way of spending our time.
Can I remind you that you have already tried something like this, because Alexis Tsipras invite you to run in Greece at 2015, because you have some very clear proposals about how the Greece has to deal with the debt crisis. And then Alexis Tsipras adopted your ideas, invite you, make you Minister of Economics, and then this system didn't quite went well. So how much the European New Deal, it's a paper that if a party wants to adapt it, run the elections, how you can be sure that it is going to be involved this time?
Well, this is an excellent question, because it really highlights the difference in our approach. You see, you're quite right. The reason why I entered the Syriza government in 2015 was because there was a meeting of minds, or supposedly there was a meeting of minds, between myself and Alexis Tsipras and 2 or 3 at most other people within Syriza. So there was a nation-state-based party which had its own nation-state-based focus and dynamic. They had just had a congress before I got into these discussions with them. They had created an agenda, an economic policy agenda, which was completely out of place and irrelevant to the circumstances that Greece was facing in relation to its creditors, the Eurogroup, the rest of Europe. This is what you get when you have a nation-state-based political entity that is not alive to the requirements and the demands of the economic crisis, which is pan-European. So this, what you say, is absolutely spot on. Even though we had an agreement between us, the Prime Minister and me, who became his finance minister as a result of this agreement proved too brittle, because the political foundation on which it was based, the political party, Syriza, that was nation-state-based and incapable of, unwilling to, and removed from the pan-European perspective which DiEM25 is producing, simply could not follow, or it was very easy for somebody like Alexis Tsipras to subvert that agreement. So what we're trying to do here is precisely the inverse. Instead of having a confederacy between individual politicians, as we did in Greece, or a confederacy which is the European Party of the Left, or the Democrats and Socialists, so the SPD and the Socialist Party and the PSOE in Spain and so on, they are very different beasts. And they get together like a pack of wolves in Brussels, and they have a kind of confederal agreement which really means nothing in practice. We are creating a transnational movement. We are creating a policy that we put together as Germans, as Italians, as Greeks, as Poles, as Brits, all together, working along the same lines, in the same context, creating a pan-European European New Deal agenda. And what we are proposing to do is take it to voters as a transnational party. Now, it is our considered opinion that the only chance Europe has comes from this approach. The confederal approach that we've utilized so far in Europe is part of the problem, and it is bound to fail, even if very good people are involved in it.
It's not exactly follow, but it's a good sense. Yesterday we have the leak of the regular ESM proposal that said that Greece doesn't need to have a haircut on anything reprofiling, because if she keeps doing austerity for the next 20 years and keeps more than 3% of surplus, there is no need for anything to do with debt. Can you have a comment? Because Alexis Tsipras, our Prime Minister, yesterday supported somehow the idea yesterday.
Well, once you have surrendered to illogic once, then you become a hostage to it. Look, no one in the Eurogroup, not a single person in the Eurogroup, believes that what they agreed to is going to end the Greek crisis. What they agreed to is extending into the future yet again while pretending that they have overcome it. It is clear, even from their body language, that this is the case. Common sense, independently of political party affiliation, points in this direction. The denial of a logical solution to the Greek debt and economic crisis, a crisis that could be very, very simple for Europe to overcome, is symptomatic of the wholesale fragmentation of the European Union and the inability of the political personnel and the bureaucratic personnel, the so-called technocracy of the European Union, to deal with this crisis. This is why Europe is fragmenting. Greece is the canary in the mine. It is like the small canary that the miners would take down the galleries to warn them through its death that there is methane in the mine. The canary is not responsible for the methane, but its death should be a warning. The fact that for 7 years now, Europe is refusing to take the hint that there is something structurally the matter, which has nothing to do with Greece, is a sure sign that DiEM25 is absolutely essential.
Concerning the approach that you're talking about, one thing that I've noticed with my Italian compatriots is that when I try to bring them policy, good ideas, I find a natural resistance even to the concept that I present policy instead of a person. And what I find is that DiEM is not competing against counter ideas. DiEM is competing against a politics of fear. And it seems very difficult to try and introduce kind of rational responses when people are, you know, electing Donald Trump and merely electing a pen. They're not responding to the ideas and responding to some kind of emotion. And how do you think DiEM competes against that?
Can I maybe the mic, it works, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very good question because what we can see also with left-wing parties all around Europe is that our comrades have chosen the path of some sort of populism. You can see it in different countries of Europe where they actually count on passion and emotion, which I think is important today in politics, especially with the rise of Trump, Farage, and Le Pen, and so on. But instead of proposing concrete policy papers, they only count on the hands in the air, if I can put it like a metaphor, which can bring votes, of course, and which can bring, to a certain degree, electoral success. But once they come to power, or once they come close to power, actually their votes start to fall down. This is what we can see in different countries of Europe. What DiEM is doing, as Yanis said, is a sort of political invention. On the one hand, I think the first political invention what we are proposing today is the one what Yanis already mentioned, which will be discussed with our members from today to Brussels the next several months, This is the title of this. This is why here is a question mark, because what we have seen until now is the model that you have different political parties, even on the left-green spectrum. Then they enter the European Parliament, then they form a family, and then they become impotent, if I may say so. Except Nigel Farage or Le Pen, who are very smart, precisely as you said, by using passion, emotion, and populism, to use the European Parliament in order to get more votes in their own domestic, national-based state countries. What we are trying to do is to inverse this model, and on the other side, and I think that's the second political invention, although there are many more as well, is that instead of just going into populism and just counting on passion and emotion, we are trying to inverse this as well and create a progressive European agenda, which in our mind, to again speak more theoretically, should be part of a new constituent process. So that all pillars or policy papers what DiEM is proposing, including the European New Deal, and today, already at the panels which will happen in this room and the other room, we are starting a discussion on creating a new big serious policy paper on technological sovereignty on Europe, which no movement, pan-European movement or political party, except some exceptions like the city of Barcelona is proposing. But what we are trying to propose is to propose this on a European level. What to do with the dominance of Google, what to do with the dominance of Cambridge Analytica, who had a major impact in the UK elections as we have seen recently. What to do with the penetration of Silicon Valley into our daily lives with so-called sharing economy, with Uber, Airbnb, and so on. This is not something which can be solved on the city level. This is not something which can be solved on the national level. It can only be solved on the European level. But if you really want to solve this, you cannot solve this by populism. You can only solve it if you understand the problem and if you have concrete proposals how to solve it. But again, to finish, at the same time, as you will see tonight, I hope, where this theater was sold out in 2 or 3 days. It will be packed by more than 1,000 people. I think there is no movement in Europe today under one single name, under one single conviction, as it was outlined in our manifesto, which can pack such legendary theaters as Volksbühne or Beaux-Arts in Brussels, or theaters in Ireland, to Greece. We had a basketball stadium with 3,000 people only 2 weeks ago in Athens, completely filled, which provokes so much enthusiasm. So in that sense, I think DiEM is giving back not only concrete policy papers, but also hope and passion. And I see it every day when I speak and when I discuss and when I work together with our volunteers. I mean, today here at Volksbühne, half of the theater will be filled with volunteers and activists who came from all around Europe, paid their own tickets, paid their own hotels, they're not on a salary and so on. And this number of people are growing and growing day by day.
Weitere Fragen? Ich würde gerne noch mal daran erinnern, kurz Redaktion und Name zu sagen. Bitte die Dame dorthin.
Wir haben keine Redaktion überhaupt, but I am having also some Google and Apple shares. So I have a real question about your ways of doing with innovation, with Wi-Fi and connections which go beyond Europe and which enter Europe from all parts of Italy as well as Germany. So how is your tendency to deal with internet programs?
What is the question again? What is the
The
tendency?
question is, when you are talking about Google, this looks negative. I refer to you. When I am a tiny shareholder of Google, I ask myself if I do a wrong thing supporting Google and Apple and so on. So it's very important to maintain, I guess, the communication infrastructure in the internet, in Europe and outside. So what
Yes, 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 yes.
In my
Yes, thanks a lot. I answer very brief, and then Yanis. I think it's not a problem that you're a shareholder of Google, to put it like this. It's a problem that every single person in this room is working for Google for free. and they are not shareholders for Google. But I don't want to go into detail because this was supposed to be a press conference and not a panel. I invite you kindly to join the panel at 1:30, which will deal precisely with these questions, and members of DM and experts will answer what we plan to do there. Yanis.
Okay, bitte.
As a new HVC presenter for peace and non-violence, we are very much worried about the arm race that is going on. And Juszczyzko, you mentioned it, that Trump now is in Brussels. He wants more money, even more. And not just, I mean, this is endangering Europe and the whole world, but it's also taking resources that are so badly needed to come out of this European crisis. Now, honestly, I didn't read the whole New Deal of Europe, just a summary, but it seems to me the military expenses aren't included. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're quite right. We have ignored the issue altogether because this is about the European New Deal. And what is the point of the European New Deal? To deal with the European economic crisis. What is the essence of the European economic crisis? What is the main cause of it? Allow me to say that it's one. The huge discrepancy between savings and investment. We have the highest level of savings as a proportion of national income in every country, including in Germany, since 1950, and we have the lowest level of investment, again as a proportion of national income, since 1950. You only need to state this to realize why we are in this, why such powerful centrifugal forces are giving rise to loss of hope, loss of prospects, and loss of optimism and dynamism within the European social economy. Military expenditure is irrelevant when it comes to the economic crisis of Europe. It is highly relevant when it comes to the chances of peace and the prospects of a European foreign policy which is consistent with humanism. So the reason why there is nothing in the European New Deal is because we need a completely different paper, policy paper, to address the question of European foreign policy. These are three words that if you put together, you end up with a joke. European foreign policy. There is no such thing. And the greatest beneficiaries of the lack of a European foreign policy are the arms dealers of the world, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump.
Letzte Frage. Bitte schön.
Having read quite a bit about NASA experiences in Greece trying to negotiate with the Troika in Europe, part of the motivation for expanding the M25 is because power in Europe does not really reside in the European Parliament. And I'm wondering how, if the M25 succeeds in finding this political expression through national parliaments and through European Parliament, what does it take to actually effect changes, given that the power is somewhere else? And how does this process of liberalisation actually happen?
We do not have a European Parliament. We have something called the European Parliament. It's the only parliament in the history of the world which does not have the right to initiate legislation. You only have to state that to realize that there is a great disconnect between the title and the reality. But that is not an accident. This is not a deficit. To say that there is a democratic deficit in the European Union is, as I've said many times before, to say that there is an oxygen deficit in space. There is no oxygen deficit in space. There is no oxygen. Yep. So the question is, how do you democratize Europe? And the answer we give, and it is clearly stated in our manifesto, is on the basis of two phases. The first phase must be the phase of stabilization. At the moment, the European social economy is in a downward spiral. it is not dynamically stable. It is disintegrating. There are economic and social forces tearing Europe apart. While this downward spiral is continuing, there can be no serious discussion about a new democratic constitution for Europe as a whole. So phase one is what we need to do to stabilize Europe. And the answer we give is a European New Deal. Phase two must be, if we succeed in stabilizing the social economy of Europe, stabilization on its own will have created sufficient optimism and positive feelings and expectations for Europeans to have a chance, no guarantee, a chance of embarking upon a constitutional process, a process that would lead through assemblies, through ferocious politicking, democratic politicking, intense dialogue, to creating that which Europe needs at the political level, and that is a democratic constitution by which to replace all these awful treaties.
Vielen Dank, dass Sie bei uns waren. Sie finden die versprochenen Materialien auf Ihrem Weg aus dem Roten Salon. Vielen Dank.